Are we allowed to be happy?
You people should stick to cleaning tables, not touching dying kids. That sentence sliced through the restaurant air like a knife. For a moment, everything froze, the clinking glasses, the soft jazz, even the heartbeat of the man sitting in the corner booth. Bryce Lancaster, billionaire CEO of one of America's largest tech empires, slowly lifted his gaze, his jaw tightened. Across the room, the waitress who had just been humiliated stood perfectly still, tray trembling in her hands, but her eyes didn't flinch. Her name was Jasmine Carter, 26 years old, black, beautiful. A quiet fire wrapped in a neat beige uniform and a name tag too small for her strength. It was supposed to be a quiet dinner. Bryce had brought his 3 daughters, the Lancaster Triplets, to the most exclusive restaurant in Charleston. Everyone there knew the rumor. The girls had only 1 week left to live. Their illness was rare, cruel, and incurable. The waitstaff whispered. The guests stared. Some with pity, others with curiosity. But Jasmine didn't stare. She looked at those girls with something no one else dared to show: warmth. When she leaned closer to serve the table, her voice was soft, steady, almost melodic. "I've seen that look before," she said quietly, her eyes flicking to the girls' pale faces. "My little sister had the same eyes before she went away." Bryce froze mid-breath. No one ever dared to speak about death in front of his children, not like that. Not so gently, not so human. The restaurant manager stormed over, furious. "Apologize to Mr. Lancaster, now." But Jasmine only shook her head. No child should be made to feel like a ghost before they're gone. A silence followed, heavy, electric. Bryce looked at her, not with anger this time, but with something he hadn't felt in years: curiosity. And that was the moment everything began to change. This is not just a story about wealth or medicine. This is a black story about dignity, compassion, and a woman who refused to stay invisible. You're watching Hidden Worth. Stay with me, because what happens next will challenge everything you believe about miracles. The next morning, Jasmine stood outside the Lancaster estate, clutching a worn duffel bag that held everything she owned. The gates were taller than any building she'd ever lived in. Through the iron bars, she saw the mansion's stone, glass, and silence. No laughter, no life. She wasn't supposed to be there. She hadn't been hired through an agency. No one called her. But after that night at the restaurant, something pulled her there like gravity. She'd found the address online. And when the butler opened the door, ready to shoo her away, Bryce Lancaster's voice rang from upstairs. "Let her in." Jasmine stepped into a house that felt more like a museum. Every corner polished, every room too clean to breathe in. A nurse passed by, avoiding eye contact. The air smelled like disinfectant and hopelessness. She was led down a long hallway to the children's wing. The walls were lined with pastel wallpaper, soft toys arranged like artifacts, untouched. Then she saw them. 3 little girls, lying in separate hospital beds, tubes attached to their thin arms, their eyes half open. Lila, Ivy, Nora. Triplets, but each girl was different. Lila had freckles across her nose. Ivy's hair curled tighter than the others. Nora looked the weakest, her skin nearly translucent. No one spoke as Jasmine entered. The nurse scribbled something on a chart and walked out without a word. Jasmine placed her bag on the floor and pulled up a chair. "Hi," she said gently, kneeling by the closest bed. "I'm Jasmine. I don't have a degree. I don't have a title. But I'm here if you want me to be." Lila blinked slowly. Ivy didn't move. Nora whimpered in her sleep. For the next few hours, Jasmine stayed in that room. She read aloud softly fairy tales, old Southern stories her grandmother once told. She didn't touch the machines. She didn't ask medical questions. She just stayed. By evening, Bryce returned from his meetings. He found her in the corner, holding Nora's hand. Something in his face hardened. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm giving them something they haven't had in a while," Jasmine replied without looking up. "A presence that doesn't wear gloves." "This isn't a charity, it's a medical crisis," he snapped. "I know," she said quietly. "But if you've done everything else and they're still dying, maybe it's time to try something different." He said nothing. That night, For the first time in weeks, none of the girls cried in their sleep. 7 days, that's all the doctors gave them. But Jasmine had no timeline, just a heart that refused to clock out. And a promise whispered to her sister years ago: if I ever see someone with the same eyes, I won't walk away. The Lancaster estate was quiet the next morning, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that followed tension, not rest. Jasmine walked into the kitchen to get tea for the girls. The moment she stepped in, the room fell cold. Miss Regina, the housekeeper, stood by the counter, arms crossed, her posture stiff. 2 maids quickly looked away, pretending to be busy with silverware that didn't need polishing. Jasmine offered a polite smile. "Morning." Miss Regina didn't return it. "You're still here." "I am," Jasmine replied, reaching for the kettle. "I figured the girls might like some warm tea this morning." Miss Regina walked over slowly, heels clicking on the marble floor. "Let's get something straight. You may have fooled Mr. Lancaster for a moment, but you don't belong here." Jasmine looked up, calm. "I'm not here to belong. You think a few soft words and bedtime stories will fix what science couldn't?" Regina's voice was low, sharp. "You're just a waitress, honey. One who got lucky someone let you pass the gates." Jasmine stirred the tea slowly, not letting the words cut too deep. She'd heard worse. "I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm just trying to be kind to 3 little girls who deserve more than silence." Regina leaned in closer. "This is a world of power. Money, prestige, not sympathy, and certainly not second chances for women like you." Jasmine met her eyes. "You mean black women?" Regina blinked but didn't deny it. Jasmine continued, her voice steady, quiet but full. "I grew up learning that some people will always see me as a threat before they see me as a human, that some rooms weren't made for me. But I also learned that love walks into rooms it's not invited to and stays." There was no comeback, just the sound of a spoon tapping porcelain and the tension that followed truth. Later that day, as Jasmine passed through the halls with the tea tray, the stares continued. The security guard by the stairs didn't greet her. The chef muttered something under his breath. Even the gardener glanced up from the hedges with a look that wasn't curious, it was doubtful. But Jasmine held her head high, steps quiet but certain. Back in the girls' room, she placed the tray down gently. Nora opened her eyes first, managing a faint smile. "You came back," the little girl whispered. Jasmine smiled, brushing a curl from the child's forehead. "I'll always come back." Because she knew, kindness is loudest when it walks through rooms built to silence it. There was a photo hanging in the hallway of the Lancaster home, 3 golden-haired girls in matching dresses, standing in front of a yacht on a glittering lake. Smiles wide, cheeks flushed, their hands clutched cotton candy like it was treasure. It was from a year ago, before the diagnosis. Now, no one took pictures. Doctors came and went. Specialists flew in from Boston, New York, even Germany. They examined, prescribed, whispered in corners, and then they left always with the same expression: hopeless. People stopped visiting too. Former friends of Bryce, socialites who once begged to be invited to the estate, now declined politely. The triplets had become uncomfortable. Sick children made people uneasy. "They're cursed," one old investor muttered after a dinner party. "I hear it's genetic," another guest had said quietly. "Must be something wrong in the bloodline." Bryce heard it all. He said nothing, but each comment carved deeper into the walls he built around himself. The media wasn't kinder. Tabloids ran headlines like "Tech Mogul's Tragic Heirs" and "Lancaster Triplets, a Life Too Short." One column even accused Bryce of exploiting their illness for sympathy investments. So he shut the world out. No more interviews, no more parties, no more photos, just silence and machines. And in that silence, the girls withered not just physically, but emotionally. Lila, once the loudest, hadn't spoken in 2 days. Ivy refused to be touched, shrinking away from anyone in scrubs. Nora, always the smallest, began asking if they were going to go to sleep forever. When Jasmine entered their room that afternoon, Ivy was curled against the wall, whispering to herself. Lila sat cross-legged, staring blankly at a broken music box. Nora lay still, eyes open but unfocused. Jasmine sat cross-legged on the floor, not speaking, just being. After a while, She reached into her bag and pulled out 3 beaded bracelets, each one handmade, imperfect. She had made them years ago, for a sister who never got to wear hers. "I know what it feels like," Jasmine said softly. "To be treated like you're already gone, like you don't matter anymore." Lila looked up, barely. "But you're not invisible to me," Jasmine continued. "You're not a rumor or a tragedy or a headline. You're Lila, Ivy, Nora, and I see you." She handed each girl a bracelet. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ivy reached out hesitantly and took hers. Jasmine smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "From one forgotten girl to another, let's not be forgotten anymore." That night, after the girls had fallen asleep, the house sank into its usual hush. Outside, the wind rattled the magnolia trees. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse's pager beeped faintly. But in the girls' room, it was calm like a pocket of warmth hidden in a house made of grief. Jasmine sat by the window, arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes watching the moonlight spill across the floor. She hadn't meant to stay this long. She was supposed to be gone after that first night. But something about these girls kept calling her back. She heard a soft whisper, "Miss Jasmine." It was Nora, the smallest, voice hoarse from sleep. "Yeah, baby, I'm here," Jasmine replied, moving to the bedside. Nora looked up, eyes glossy. "Why are you not scared of us?" Jasmine paused. "Scared of you?" Nora nodded. "Everyone else looks scared. Even when they smile, it's not real. Like they already said goodbye." Jasmine took her hand, brushing her thumb gently across the back of it. "I'm not scared, sweet girl. You remind me of someone." "Who?" "My little sister," Jasmine whispered. The room seemed to lean in closer. Her name was Aaliyah. She was 5 when she got sick. The kind of sick where no one says the name out loud. My mom cried a lot, but only in the laundry room. Daddy stopped coming home. People from church dropped off casseroles, then stopped showing up altogether. "What happened to her?" Nora asked, voice almost afraid. Jasmine smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hurt. She was braver than all of us, even when her hair fell out, even when she couldn't walk. She used to hold my hand and say, "Don't worry, Jazzy, I'll still be your sister, even from the stars." Nora squeezed her hand tighter. "She passed on a Wednesday," Jasmine continued. "The sky was bright, but our house felt darker than night. I made her a bracelet the night before, but she never got to wear it." A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "I promised her something," she said softly. "That if I ever saw another girl with her eyes, those tired, beautiful eyes, I'd stay. I wouldn't run." The room fell quiet. And then Lila stirred in her bed, whispering, "We're glad you stayed." Ivy turned over and added, "Me too." Jasmine looked at all 3 of them, their faces pale but calm. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Not now, not ever." And with the moonlight glowing like a quiet promise across their beds, Jasmine finally allowed herself to remember not with pain, but with purpose. The next morning, Jasmine was helping Ivy sit up in bed when the door swung open. Dr. Leonard Voss entered, clipboard in hand, coat crisp, and expression colder than the tiled floor beneath his feet. Behind him trailed a nurse, eyes down, footsteps silent. "Who gave you permission to move her?" he snapped, not even bothering to look Jasmine in the eye. Jasmine stood slowly, keeping her voice calm. "She asked to sit. I made sure she was stable. There's no harm in that." "No harm?" he scoffed. "You're not a nurse. You're not trained. You're a waitress with a savior complex." Ivy flinched. Jasmine stepped in front of the bed, her voice firm but steady. "You weren't here when she woke up crying. You weren't here when she whispered that she wanted to feel the sun again. I was. So no, I didn't need a license to hold her hand." Dr. Voss's eyes narrowed. "I don't care how emotionally attached you are. These girls are not toys for your redemption arc. They are fragile. One wrong move, and they'll die?" Jasmine cut in, her voice rising just enough to shake the room. "Isn't that what you've been saying all along? That they're already as good as gone?" The nurse gasped quietly, but Voss's expression didn't waver. "You want to control this house like a lab, doctor," Jasmine continued. But these kids aren't lab rats. They're children, and they're scared. Not just of dying, but of being forgotten while they're still breathing. Voss stepped forward, his voice low, deliberate. You think hugs and lullabies are going to change their vitals, save their lungs, restart their failing hearts? No, Jasmine said quietly, but it might give them a reason to keep fighting, because right now, you've stripped them of every ounce of hope. A pause stretched between them. Then Voss turned to Bryce, who had silently entered during the exchange, his expression unreadable. Mr. Lancaster, the doctor said, smoothing his coat. This woman is interfering with medical protocol. I suggest you have her removed. Bryce looked at Jasmine, then at his daughters, who were wide-eyed and gripping their blankets tightly. For the first time in weeks, Lila's voice broke the silence. Please don't make her leave. Then Ivy, her voice shaking. She makes the pain less loud. Bryce took a long breath, then finally said, She stays. Dr. Voss stiffened, but didn't argue. As he walked out, Jasmine didn't gloat. She simply turned back to the girls and whispered, Let's get some sunlight. Because she wasn't fighting for pride, she was fighting for life. The storm rolled in without warning. By nightfall, thunder cracked the sky like a whip, and rain lashed against the glass windows of the Lancaster estate with a fury that rattled the panes. The power flickered once, then again, before the backup generators kicked in with a low mechanical hum. Shadows danced across the walls like ghosts returning for unfinished business. Jasmine was in the girls' room when it began. She had just finished reading them a story, one of Aaliyah's favorites, when Ivy clutched her stomach and whimpered. Within seconds, Nora began coughing deep, wet, hollow. Lila's breathing grew shallow, her chest rising unevenly beneath her nightgown. Stay with me, Jasmine said, her voice calm but sharp. She pressed the emergency button. No one came. Jasmine ran into the hallway. The power flickered again. Somewhere down the corridor, a nurse called out, We lost signal. The storm knocked out communications. Jasmine turned back, rain pounding against the roof above like drums of panic. The girls were getting worse, fast. She grabbed cold cloths, honey from her personal stash, and adjusted their oxygen tubes as best she could. She whispered to each one, touching their foreheads, rubbing their hands, begging them to stay with her. Lila, baby, breathe. Just like we practiced, in through your nose. Ivy, listen to my voice, follow it, you're safe. Nora, come on, sweet girl, squeeze my hand. Tears mixed with sweat and rain leaking in through the window cracks. And then Lila stopped moving. No, Jasmine whispered, pulling her close. Her pulse was faint, too faint. Jasmine did what she had never done before. She screamed, Help, someone help us. No answer. So she started CPR, pressing her hands over that tiny chest, counting out loud through her sobs. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. Thunder crashed outside, but Jasmine didn't stop. I promised your sister I wouldn't let another little girl slip away, she cried. You are not leaving me, Lila. Not tonight. The door burst open. Bryce stood there, soaking wet, hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes locked onto Lila. Oh God, he whispered. He rushed in, dropping to his knees beside Jasmine. For the first time, he didn't question her. He didn't ask what to do. He followed her lead. They worked together, father and stranger, fear and faith, until finally, Lila gasped. A breath, then another, then a scream. And it was the most beautiful sound Jasmine had ever heard. Tears spilled down Bryce's face. Jasmine collapsed beside him, both of them drenched, shaking, broken but alive. Outside, the storm still raged. But inside that room, something else had begun. A second chance. By morning, the storm had passed. The sun broke through the clouds like a quiet miracle, casting golden light across the drenched estate. The walls of the Lancaster mansion, once cold and silent, now shimmered with something new. Not paint, not polish, but warmth. Something had shifted. In the kitchen, the maids moved more softly, but not from fear. Their voices were no longer whispers but gentle hums, small talk about the weather, warm croissants placed on plates with care. Even the air smelled different, like cinnamon and healing. In the living room, a fire crackled not for warmth, but for comfort. Upstairs, the girls were awake. Lila sat propped up on a pile of pillows, cheeks pink for the first time in weeks. Ivy was braiding Nora's hair while giggling, their laughter breaking the silence that had haunted those halls. Nurses stepped in, not with charts and needles, but with genuine smiles, carrying mugs of warm milk instead of syringes. And at the heart of it all was Jasmine. She didn't walk like a guest anymore. She moved like someone who belonged. In the hallway, a young butler passed her, and for the first time, he didn't avoid her gaze. He smiled. "Morning, Miss Jasmine." She smiled back. "Morning, Caleb." Outside, Bryce stood on the porch, staring out at the horizon. When Jasmine joined him, he didn't speak for a long time. Just stood there, shoulders relaxed in a way they hadn't been since, maybe ever. "They're better," he finally said. Jasmine nodded. "They're still fragile, but they're fighting." He turned to her, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen. "You saved them." She shook her head. "They saved themselves. I just reminded them what it feels like to be seen." Bryce studied her, then said quietly, "You changed this house." Jasmine glanced behind them, where the windows now let in sunlight, not shadows, where laughter replaced machines, where 3 little girls were finally allowed to just be kids. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "They wanted to live. This house just needed permission to breathe again." He looked down at his hands, once clenched with control, now resting at his sides. "I thought I could fix everything with money." "Money can't hold a child's hand when they're scared," Jasmine replied softly. "But you can." For the first time, he smiled. And it wasn't the smile of a CEO who had won another battle. It was the smile of a father grateful, broken, healing. The Lancaster mansion had once been a place of sterile order and quiet sorrow. Now, it was alive. And in every corner, every room, every whispered "thank you," lived the echo of something deeper than science or strategy. Love. Raw, imperfect, human love. And that had changed everything. It was the 3rd day since the storm, and peace had settled over the Lancaster estate like fresh snow, quiet, soft, and almost too good to be real. But underneath the calm, something stirred. Bryce had changed. Everyone could see it. He spent mornings with the girls, feeding them breakfast, reading them stories in the afternoon, and most shocking of all, tucking them in at night. He smiled more, spoke less about business, and listened when the girls spoke, even when their words didn't make sense. But Jasmine knew. She knew that behind his newly softened gaze, Bryce was still carrying something heavy. Something he had buried beneath layers of power suits, press conferences, and billion-dollar deals. That night, while the girls slept and the house hummed with quiet, Bryce found Jasmine alone in the garden. She was sitting on the stone bench, arms wrapped around herself, looking up at the stars. He sat beside her. "They keep asking about their mom," he said, "and I keep pretending I have answers." Jasmine didn't reply. She waited. "I never told anyone this," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Not the press, not the staff, not even the girls." He paused. "I met their mother when I was 25. She was the only woman who ever looked at me like I wasn't a product, like I was just... Bryce, we got married fast, too fast." She was full of fire, reckless, messy, and completely unafraid. He swallowed hard. But she hated this world, the money, the meetings, the weight of my name. When she found out she was pregnant with triplets, she panicked. Said she didn't want them to grow up in a house full of marble and silence. Jasmine turned to him, brows furrowed. "She left right after they were born," Bryce continued. "Just disappeared. I raised them alone. Well, I paid others to do it, but I wasn't really there." He exhaled sharply. "When they got sick, I didn't feel fear. I felt guilt, like it was justice knocking at my door." Jasmine placed a hand on his. "You thought love was measured by what you provided," she said. "But they never needed your wealth. They needed your presence." He nodded, eyes wet but unashamed. "And you," he whispered. You reminded me what real presence looks like." For a long moment, they sat in silence. Not the cold kind that once filled the Lancaster home, but the kind that lets truth breathe. And beneath the stars, with all masks off and hearts laid bare, a man who once ruled the world learned what it truly meant to be human. The next morning was quiet, touched by the kind of hush that follows an emotional storm. Bryce stood alone in the West Wing, a part of the estate no one used anymore. The door creaked open slowly, dust swirling in a shaft of morning light. Jasmine had never been in that room. No one had, not since she left. On the wall hung a single photo. A woman, laughing mid-spin, barefoot on a grassy hill, hair wild in the wind, her arms wide like she was ready to fly. Her name was Maya. Bryce stood still for a long time, staring at the picture. He could still hear her voice in this room, still feel her chaos, her warmth, her soul that refused to be tamed. "I used to think if I locked this room, I could lock away the pain," he whispered. Jasmine leaned in the doorway, quietly watching. "Did you love her?" she asked softly, though she already knew. Bryce didn't answer right away. His hand brushed across a dusty music box on the dresser. He opened it. A lullaby began to play off-key, warped by time, but somehow still beautiful. "I didn't love her," he said finally. "I adored her. But I didn't know how to keep her without breaking her." He sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress creaking beneath his weight. "She wanted to raise the girls in the mountains. No servants, no cameras, just us. I told her it was impossible, that we had responsibilities, that we owed the world something." He laughed bitterly. She looked at me and said, "Bryce, the only people we owe anything to are the ones who can't speak yet. Your daughters, they're the future, not your name, not your company." He turned to Jasmine, eyes red. And then she left. She didn't run away. She just chose to live. Without me. Jasmine stepped into the room, placing her hand over his. "She didn't leave you," she said gently. "She left the version of you that forgot how to feel." He looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. "I think if she saw the girls now, if she saw you." Jasmine smiled, her eyes soft. She'd know they were finally safe. He stood, walking over to the photo. "I used to be angry," he said. "But now I just hope she's watching." He placed the frame back on the dresser, this time facing the window, where sunlight poured in. For the first time in years, the West Wing wasn't haunted. It was remembered. And in that memory, love found its way back home. Spring arrived without permission. It crept into the corners of the Lancaster estate, first as a breeze, then as color, and finally as laughter. The garden, once just a view behind glass, was now alive. Birds nested in the trees. Flowers bloomed along the stone path, and 3 little girls chased butterflies in the golden light of April. Jasmine stood near the porch, a pitcher of lemonade in one hand and a book tucked beneath her arm. Her curls shimmered under the morning sun, and her smile was as natural as the season itself. She didn't wear a uniform anymore. She didn't need one. She belonged. Inside the kitchen, Bryce was learning how to flip pancakes, not well, but with determination. There was flour on his shirt and syrup on the counter, and when Ivy tugged on his sleeve to ask for more strawberries, he didn't call for a chef. He did it himself. "Dad, you're the worst cook," Lila giggled. "Yet somehow, you've eaten 3 pancakes," he teased, placing another on her plate. The girls were stronger now, skin brighter, eyes full of mischief. Their bodies still bore the echoes of sickness, but their spirits had outrun it long ago. And in every breath they took, there was a kind of triumph no medicine could explain. After breakfast, Bryce walked out onto the porch, wiping his hands on a towel. He stood beside Jasmine, watching the girls dance barefoot in the grass. "They look like Maya," he said quietly. Jasmine nodded. "They do, but they laugh like you." Bryce turned to her. "There was a time when I thought I'd never hear that sound again." She looked at him, eyes filled with calm. "But you are, because you stayed, you changed." He held her gaze for a long time, then asked something he hadn't dared before. "Do you think people like me get second chances?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "No one is born perfect. Second chances aren't earned by being flawless. They're earned by showing up, over and over again. He looked back at the garden, where the wind tugged playfully at the girls' dresses. They want you to build them a treehouse, she added with a smile. He laughed. Then I guess I better learn how to hold a hammer. The sun climbed higher, warming everything it touched. In the distance, wind chimes sang in the breeze. And just like that, the mansion once filled with sorrow became a home filled with life. Not because pain had vanished, but because love had stayed. And with it, a new season had begun. Life doesn't always fall apart with a crash. Sometimes, it unravels in silence in neglected birthdays, in rooms left empty, in I love yous that never leave the mouth. And when it does, we don't always notice the moment we stop living and start surviving. Bryce Lancaster was once the perfect example of success. A billionaire, a CEO, a name on magazine covers. But for all his wealth, he lived in a home filled with expensive things and empty spaces. He didn't lose his daughters the day they got sick. He started losing them the day he let love become a transaction. But here's the truth. No one is too powerful to fail, and no one is too broken to begin again. It took Jasmine, just a waitress, a girl the world had overlooked, to remind him of that. Not with grand speeches or magic cures, but with time, with presence. With the kind of love that doesn't make headlines but saves lives. She wasn't just a black woman working at a diner. She was grace in human form, and her story reminds us of something vital. Kindness is not weakness, and empathy is not naive. Sometimes, the people we judge too quickly are the ones most capable of healing us. Sometimes, what we need isn't a solution, it's a soul. The Lancaster triplets didn't survive because of a miracle drug. They lived because someone believed in their right to feel safe, loved, and human, until their bodies began to believe it too. So wherever you are in your journey, rich or struggling, praised or overlooked, remember this. Love is not just an emotion, it's an action, a daily choice. And sometimes, the most extraordinary change begins with the simplest act of staying. At Hidden Worth, we share Black stories that reveal the truth behind appearances, the power of empathy, and the beauty of unseen strength. Because you never know who needs to hear a story like this until it reaches them at just the right moment. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. And if you want to keep exploring real, powerful stories that celebrate resilience, subscribe to Hidden Worth. There's so much more waiting to be told. And who knows? The next story might just be yours.